Welcome back, everyone. It's your boy, Big Man, Big Books. Today, I'll be bringing to you a review of a book I've recently read. That being, of course, the first Chronicles of Druss the Legend by David Gemmell. Now, way back when, I made a review on this page, reviewing Legend by David Gemmell, which details the story of Druss the Legend, a warrior who is tasked with coming out of retirement to fight for the cause of the people of Druss Delnoch against an invading force. This story actually details the beginnings of Druss the Legend. So in the story of Legend, we do hear a bit about Druss's past through stories and through dialogue. This is how things came to be in Druss's life. Very, very interesting book. I wanted to read this for a long time. Here is my thoughts. Bit of backstory about David Gemmell. David Gemmell was a writer during the 80s, 90s and into the early 2000s who wrote fantasy books, very, very influential fantasy books that unfortunately don't get talked about a lot nowadays. The books themselves influenced a lot of writers, people like Patrick Rothfuss, writers like John Gwynne have all shared their experience reading Dread Eye books, the series that David Gemmell focused on as an influence in their future writing, particularly John Gwynne. If you're a fan of John Gwynne, I absolutely think you'll love David Gemmell's works. A lot of his books do kind of follow, heroic figures in this world of the Dread Eye, some kind of force of evil, or an army or an invader, and take them down, and there's a lot of friendship and tropes that are sort of recognisable within fantasy. So in that respect, if you're not a fan of fantasy tropes, then maybe David Gemmell won't be for you, but it does heavily sort of follow traditional fantasy tropes, particularly present for 80s, 90s kind of fantasy stories. There's no necessary kind of reading order in that respect. They've all been written in different times. You can either read in publication order or you can read in chronological order. I'm currently rereading a lot of them in chronological order now, but again, it's really down to your personal preference. The thing with the Dread Eye books in particular is they don't necessarily need to be read in a certain way. They're a little bit like how Terry Pratchett does Discworld, how they're kind of different stories within this world. Some are set before, some are set after, but there's no real kind of consequence other than maybe the odd sort of tidbit kind of Easter egg here and there. So in general, you can absolutely pick up pretty much any of his books and know where you are in terms of the story. So back to the first Chronicles of Druss the Legend. Now this was, for me, was something that I was unsure how it was going to be. I enjoyed Legend, the book. I enjoyed the story of Druss. Would I say that it's my favourite David Gemmell book? I wouldn't say it was. I believe Legend is one of his first books, and it's great. It really kind of planted the seed for me in terms of my love for his work. But Druss as a character was not someone I was really particularly bothered about knowing a great deal about in terms of his kind of past life. However, saying that, now I've read the book, I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this. In fact, it's been one of the best books I've read this year. I won't be going into spoilers in this book, but just to kind of put things into perspective, the story kind of focuses on Druss the Legend in his youth. He's 17 years old, and slavers have kidnapped his wife to sell into slavery. Now, this is already a known fact. We know this from the Legend novel. It's talked about when he discusses his previous, sort of life. But this just sort of details how things came to be and the sheer kind of journey that Druss goes on. And this takes him years. This is, we see his life from the age of 17 till about, I would say probably in his 40s. So it's really interesting to see how that character progressed. And I kind of felt as though that, Druss was a great character in Legend, but felt a little bit one-sided, a little bit of a kind of, someone who is, obviously a hero, but I didn't feel he was the character I kind of, was really interested in reading a lot about. In fact, I found that in Legend there was other characters and other POVs that I was really more interested in than Druss himself. However, in this story, it's really great to see how David Gemmell's writing is also developed in the respect that Druss is a much more fleshed out character and, has gone from a clumsy 17-year-old boy in love, and and how he kind of has defied all odds, and has become, well, what we know as is the Death Walker. That's what he's known as in the later series. Now, does the book do anything kind of majorly different than anything else? No, it doesn't. David Gemmell isn't trying to reinvent the wheel here. He's not, doing anything that I haven't seen, done time and time again. Is he one of the OGs in respect of this kind of, genre? Absolutely, he is. So it's really important, I feel, if you're a fantasy fan, to go and revisit some of these classics and see, where a lot of these tropes and storylines have kind of been influenced from. For example, a trope that David Gemmell tends to use quite a lot is characters who go berserk or berserker, which is obviously something where a warrior almost takes a transformation in some way and becomes, almost like an animal in respect of fighting in a battle. This is a trope I've seen along the way in Robin Hobb's Assassin's Apprentice series. We've also seen it in John Gwyn's work. We've seen it in all sorts of fiction. We all know of that sort of role that character kind of fills in fantasy books. So it's great to see earlier works that sort of utilise that, and the kind of Viking kind of aspect of it as well. So really, really something I hold dear. In terms of any criticism I have of this book, I don't really have anything major to say, because a lot of my major criticisms with David Gemmell in the past seem to have really kind of corrected himself in this book. So this is obviously, chronologically, it's something like the 4th or 5th book, but this was maybe like the 8th or 9th book he wrote in the Jedi series. If you think about in the original books, there was a lot of issues around women and how they're portrayed, and the kind of silliness of kind of them falling in love 3 pages into meeting someone. So he didn't really write women that well, to be honest. That was always the main thing I kind of hated about the books. In this, it feels as though he really kind of started to flesh out his characters. Rowena, Druss's wife, who was kidnapped, is a very interesting character. Really kind of found a way to flesh her out a lot more, make her story a lot more interesting. So I really, really enjoyed that aspect. And you know what? It's even though it's a fantasy book, it's action, it's also a really, really great romance story. So really enjoyed it. Really looking forward to reading the next instalment in David Gemmell's work. I don't normally post on here. I predominantly post my reviews and videos on TikTok. The TikTok handle is Big Man Big Books Review. If you want to check that out, you absolutely can. I will hopefully be adding more videos onto here, so we'll have to see how time goes on. Alright, thank you for watching. What have you been reading this month? Let me know in the comments. Take care and goodbye.